What's up, everybody? Welcome to the View from Jamestown podcast edition. This is episode 11th. Today is September 10th, so we're trying to make it a little bit as confusing as possible here, but thank you for sitting down this morning. I'm sitting down with Matt Francoeur, TCC's regulatory and sales specialist. Maddie, thank you for joining us this morning.
Glad to be here again.
Maddie, you got a couple nicknames going on.
Matty Ice, Matty Hardcore.
Yeah, a couple ones going on around the office. But so sitting down this morning, episode 11 on the View from Jamestown podcast edition. This is our Chinese tariff update part 2. You might have, if you've heard the first edition 4 or 5 weeks ago now, we promised a second part to this series, I guess we'll call it, and more than likely will be at least 1 or 2 more coming down the line as we're monitoring the tariff updates and seeing what's happening with these proposed Chinese tariffs and Trump continuing to make announcements. So maybe jump right into it. Let's talk about what's happened in the last 4 or 5 weeks. I know it's been a little bit quiet and we're still kind of in a holding pattern to see what ends up happening here. But Matt, maybe you want to talk a little bit about what's happened, if anything, what's kind of been accomplished and where things are at and what people can look forward to seeing coming down the line likely soon.
Sounds like a plan. So to give a little bit of background and a rundown of what's happened so far, the USTR, the U.S. Trade Representative, has published so far 3 lists under the Section 301 tariffs, which were created in response to intellectual property violations and Made in China 2025 policy put out by the Chinese government. List 1 and 2 were really not affecting the chemical industry all that much. It was a lot of
kind of unrelated.
Yeah, exactly.
To us, at least. I mean, obviously they're very important to certain industries, but for us, or the chemical industry as a whole, not a major factor.
That's it. Yeah. So a lot of like mechanical equipment, agricultural equipment, and stuff like that. And list 3 was really the important one for our industries, the chemical company, and that included just a huge amount of organic and inorganic chemicals from sections 28, 29, and 38. So far, we've identified 21 of TCC's chemicals that exist on this list. And the only changes that have happened to list 3 since our last podcast are that Trump is heavily looking at raising the tariff percentage from 10%, maybe up to 25%. And I think anywhere within that range is kind of fair play in his mind.
So was list 3 supposed to be 10% across the board, and now is going to be 25% across the board, or does it vary depending on the product?
That's a speculation. I think it's across the board for anything. So it might be 10 across the board, might be 25 across the board. I don't think you would have 10 for product A and 25 for product B because they'd have to split it up. And I think that would require.
And that's what we've seen from list 1 and 2. It's been X percentage of the whole list. It hasn't changed within the.
That's it.
Within the list itself. Got it. Okay.
That's exactly it. Yeah. But this list includes a lot more items. It's 6,000 lies as opposed to 284 on list 2. Or I'm sorry, 279 on list 2 and 818 on list 1. So this is really, really massive. And
so what's happened? I think we did the last one early August, and now we're early to mid-September. So what's happened in the last couple weeks? What deadlines have passed? What are people doing, both in DC as well as just chemical companies as a whole? What are they doing surrounding these podcasts or these? Not these podcasts, got podcasts on my head, with these tariff lists.
So in the last few weeks, there was a opportunity for public comment at the USTR's office. I believe it was at their office. And it was 3 days, August 20th through the 23rd. And that was just an opportunity. And there's a list published out there of who actually came to speak. But it was a lot of, you look at the list, it's a lot of industry leaders and people who are up close and personal on the business side of these. And I didn't see too many private citizens or groups that care about this thing coming to see. Beyond that, there were 6,000 comments published within the past month. As of the last update we gave you guys, there are only 818 comments. So you see a lot of industry leaders coming out in force and, against, for the most parts, against these tariffs.
So that was 818 comments as of early August, and now we're at 6,000?
That's correct, yeah.
Wow.
Yep, and based on an interview on Air Force One with Donald Trump, I think it was early or late last week, he said that the ball really is in China's court, and if they don't do something he likes, he's going to come down hard. So as the USTR prepares to gear up and make this decision, it's kind of looking like it'll be closer to that 25% across the board tariff, and I don't see many of these tariff line items being excluded unless we see something pretty big from China.
So we're obviously looking at our own tariffs on stuff coming in from China, but at the same time, the Chinese government is looking at stuff on their own front as well. So it's kind of a wait and see on both sides to see what China ends up doing.
Absolutely. It's actually kind of interesting seeing the kind of tariffs that China is putting on us, because they don't really import, I'm going to say high technology from the U.S. So no specialty chemicals, no crazy machinery, anything like that. It's a large part agricultural products. So the big ones are pork and soybeans, and they have other sources they can bring it in from. So soybeans, you can bring them in from Brazil. That's the next biggest producer. And pork, I believe it was Russia, but there are other sources for that as well. So they really don't have the power to fight back on these tariffs tit for tat. I think for every $3 of products we buy from China, they buy $1 from us.
Got it.
So at a certain point, they just kind of have to sit and take it. And I think that's a card that Trump is playing.
Yeah, it's been interesting to follow it as best I can. Obviously, you follow it a lot closer, and some of our staff, we had Javier Fernandez and some other staff over in, where was he, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, for the APIC.
Yep.
And so that was interesting, obviously, us being an American company, but meeting with lots of South American, Latin American, Asian, European companies and hearing what everyone's talking about. It's definitely been interesting to follow it and listen to it. And we had Javier on the September View recording. I believe that was the most recent one before this one. So feel free to check that out and get Javier's comments on what he was seeing, from the APIC in that episode. It's definitely pretty interesting to see how the rest of the world is looking at it and reacting to it.
That's it. Yeah.
So we'll definitely do a part 3 to this. I think that was a good kind of quick update. We're kind of just waiting and seeing what are the upcoming deadlines and what's coming up here in the next maybe 2 weeks. I know there's a lot that's going to be announced and coming out, and what are we waiting to see in the next 2 weeks regarding these tariffs?
So I think the closest thing to us right now is the final signing of the Miscellaneous Tariff Act bill, which reduces or eliminates tariffs on, I think it's about 1,500 items, some of which are chemicals. To give you some idea, we have 21 chemicals affected by the 301 tariffs overall, and the Miscellaneous Tariff Act bill eliminates tariffs on 2 of our items. So it's not a huge amount, but definitely could help us a little bit.
And obviously that's just specific to our, what we deal with.
Exactly.
Obviously there could be companies and people that it eliminates all products. So,
hopefully they get lucky.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was verbally passed in the Senate on 7/26 and the House agreed to Senate amendments on September 4th. And it's now on President Trump's desk as of September 6th. So I think we should be looking at having that thing signed within the next few days, which would be fantastic, barring any other complaints from him. And then coming up for the Section 301 tariffs, the finalized version of List 3 will probably be posted within the next week or so. I think that's the general consensus among the news sources that I've seen.
So people submitted their retaliatory comments, and now we're just waiting to see where it's actually going to settle based on what people said. And
that's it. Yeah. So 6,000 comments. Hopefully something good happens for us, but we'll see, because let's hope China plays nice. And really what we're looking for here is the lines to be included that present tariffs on the products. Like I said before, anywhere between 10 to 25%. In the effective date, which is really, that's the biggest thing for shipments currently on the water, because I think it takes 6 to 8 weeks to get something from China.
Yep.
So if they're on the water, they're probably going to be affected
by
it. So I think that's 10 to 25%.
So that list that'll theoretically come out in the next week or two will be a more or less final list for List 3.
That's it. Yeah.
So we'll definitely know if it's going to be 10, 25, or nothing.
Yep. And when it affects us.
Got it. Okay.
And then also there's a possibility of List 4. Donald Trump said in his interview on Air Force One that he already has this list compiled, and he's just waiting to, put it out there, given that China doesn't do anything that he likes. So we'll see how that goes.
And that tariff list essentially covers the full dollar amount of things we bring in from China, right? Isn't that kind of his reasoning, or?
Yeah, I think it's bridging the gap between, what we have now under the 3 lists and, the total trade that we have with China. So I think we're looking at almost everything imported from China being tariffed.
Got it. So going to be a busy end of September on the regulatory front.
That's it.
Is what you're saying. Yep.
Yep.
Well, at least I guess for better or for worse, we'll at least know. I think there's been a lot of non-knowing between even our business and other people not understanding how to quote things, how we should be invoicing based on, there might be tariffs, there might not be tariffs. So it'll be good to at least have a definitive ruling and be able to move forward.
That's it.
Could be good, could be bad, but at least we'll know.
Might be bad.
Yeah. Awesome. Anything else people should be looking at, or any good resources you've been following along? Obviously, we'll have our own blog post on the TCC website, on our mobile app, and obviously in the show notes down. If you scroll down wherever you're listening to this, we'll have a good resource for what we're seeing and what we're publishing on the things that Matt and the TCC team is seeing. But what are some other resources that you're using that people can follow along pretty easily if they have any questions or want to check out what's included or not included?
So the best one that I've seen by far is the National Association of Chemical Distributors. They have a public-facing tariff page and one for members as well. And I'd say that's probably the most concise one. Obviously, it's more geared towards the chemical industry, but it does give you a good overview and all the sources. Really, any trade organization is really going to be.
And have you reached out to anybody with them, or are you pretty much just Googling stuff or looking at these platforms you use? It's all public facing, or are you actually in contact with anybody to discuss stuff?
So probably the most in contact I've been with someone about this was I went to ChemEdge in New Orleans a couple weeks ago, and they had a whole segment about this kind of stuff. So it's interesting to see. So,
but in terms of just researching and looking online, it's all just public information.
That's it. Yep. Cool. If you know where to look, it's easy to find.
Sure. Nice. Well, so we'll definitely have a part 3 likely end of next week. So mid to late September. Feel free to check out the part 3 to this podcast. Hopefully that'll be the end of the series. Not that I don't enjoy hanging out with you, but maybe we'll at least know at that point with what's going to happen. So we're looking forward to that, hopefully.
That's it.
And we'll check back in soon. So Maddie, thank you for sitting down, and we will talk to you soon.
Cool.